Good evening and welcome to FinTalk. I'm Renarda Joy, and tonight we're going to dive into the intersection of mental health and financial well being. But before I introduce our esteemed guests, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever wondered how your psychological well being impacts your financial decisions? Well, hang tight because in this conversation, we're going to dig just into that. Now, normally I introduce our guests, but tonight I'm going to do something a little bit different and I'm going to allow our guest to introduce himself. So let me bring on our special guest. Hi, Dr. Dokun.
Hi, Renarda. Nice to be on with you. As you mentioned, I'm Dr. Lanre Dokun. I'm an adult psychiatrist whose areas of focus include medication management and psychotherapy. I mostly treat anxiety, depression, and ADHD. A misconception a lot of people seem to have about therapy is that you'll really have to be sick before going to see a therapist. But that's actually far from the truth. My clients are very high functioning professionals who are trying to level up in their quality of life and move beyond the old patterns that may be holding them back. One of the unique focuses of my work is actually financial therapy. In talking about financial therapy, one of the things that I first want to do is to distinguish financial therapy from financial advising or planning. Financial advisors are certified financial professionals who can guide you in how best to allocate your financial resources. A financial therapist is someone who uses evidence-based therapeutic approaches to address your thought processes and emotions as it pertains to your finances. We can help you make gains on a cognitive and emotional level. And as we do so, it can clear the way for you to make the types of progress that you're seeking on a financial level and actually apply the advice that your financial advisor may be giving you.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in because you definitely have a lot of information. I know this conversation is going to be great and it's much needed. So, Dr. Dokun, I want to make sure I'm saying it properly. And your expertise in psychiatry and in the human psyche, can you explain to us how does emotional intelligence play a role in our financial behaviors and the decisions that we make?
Absolutely. I think we should start by defining emotional intelligence. Let's call it our ability to effectively engage with our own internal emotional states, as well as our ability to read and engage with the emotional states of the people around us. Let's further simplify it by boiling emotional intelligence down to self-awareness and empathy. Emotional intelligence would therefore impact our financial decisions because our financial decision making is often influenced by our emotions, right? How we view ourselves, how we feel both on an individual level and in the context of family and social systems. For instance, a decision to whether or not to buy a purse is not objective. It's not a black or white thing. It all depends on your own values and priorities. And the first question we really want to ask is why? What is your aim or goal in doing so? Without some self-awareness or self-searching, we may not understand what is driving most of our financial decision making. And that's where emotional intelligence comes into play.
Right. And a lot of times there's so many emotions that we don't realize. Like my clients, they come to me, sometimes they're dealing with fear or greed or even financial imposter syndrome or believe it or not, being overly confident. So I think it's definitely important to understand that. And I can tell that there's some long-term implications, which I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit later. So now that we've touched on emotional intelligence in our financial lives, I want to delve a little bit deeper into this fascinating concept of how psychology and finance kind of combines financial therapy. So, can you explain to the audience what exactly is financial therapy and how does it influence our emotional intelligence?
Yeah. Financial therapy is one of those new and emerging fields that's been around forever, right? It's funny because every person that I've seen who does financial therapy seems to have sort of stumbled into it. In my case, I stumbled into it because as a therapist, I noticed the tremendous impact that finances have on your mental health and vice versa. I also found it really interesting how even after overcoming it, in different cases, overcoming the stigma of seeking psychotherapy, many people still had a lot of shame or avoidance when it came to the topic of their finances. It's funny how many people feel comfortable speaking to me about their trauma, about their sex lives, and about their spiritual experiences, but shy away from the topic of money. If you're a therapist, you're going to have to do some financial therapy, even if it's not what you call it, right?
Mhm.
A lot of financial planners who get into financial therapy do so because they realize that talking about money is very rarely about just facts and figures. It
Mhm.
really is about ideas, feelings, personal history, and so much more. So the role of that financial therapy can have is to help people to better understand themselves and all the things that they bring to the table in regards to money. And in doing so, they can increase their emotional intelligence as well as become more effective in the financial aspects of their lives.
And it's so interesting because usually when you think of shame, you think of maybe children are ashamed of certain things, but we're talking about adults who are
Mhm.
still walking around with just the feeling of being ashamed of whatever it is when it comes to financial awareness or however they're handling their financial management. So I think that it's important to identify that if you're having shame, that there's help for you. And like you said, it's financial therapy. Just to kind of explore the intersection between mental health and financial well-being, I want to take a moment and let's kind of identify some of the common triggers and biases when it comes to emotional intelligence. So I know you've worked with a lot of clients and a lot of individuals. What are some of these common emotional triggers and biases that you're kind of like seeing when it comes to financial behaviors?
Yeah, as I said, our decision making is rarely objective, right? It's rarely a rational process. Instead, it's influenced by our values and beliefs, both about ourselves and the world around us. One of the forms of therapy that I practice is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for short. CBT states that what we think and what we do has profound impact on how we feel and what our lives look like. Additionally, we find that our established beliefs, whether accurate or inaccurate, tend to drive our daily thoughts and behaviors. When CBT is applied to our finances, we can begin to see that there are existing ideas or beliefs that we have about ourselves and money, which drive that decision making. In their book, Facilitating Financial Health, Clance and Collar coined the term money scripts. These money scripts are unconscious biases we have about money, which often arise from our upbringing, and they typically fall into one of these four categories. The first is money avoidance, and I think you referenced this earlier, actually. Money avoidance is when we think that money is bad, that the rich are greedy, or that we ourselves may not deserve money. It's like money becomes like a boogeyman, right? Then there's money worship. This may look like the belief that money can solve all problems, that you can never have enough money, or that money is the key to power and happiness. Another is money status, right? Money status may look like the belief that net worth equals self worth, right? And that we need the newest and latest things to keep up our self esteem, right? And lastly, money vigilance. Money vigilance, on the other hand, can look like being overly frugal, believing that one always has to be discreet or cannot talk about money, or that money is solely to be saved, right? Each one of these money scripts, money narratives, or financial worldviews will drive us to make wildly different decisions when given the same circumstances. Let's talk about that purse earlier, right? Someone who is money vigilant might never buy themselves a purse, right? Even if their old purse is, looking raggedy. Someone who has money status as a money script may, be buying purses left and right, right? So it's really important for us to be aware of whether one of these money scripts is at play in our lives.
Is it possible to have more than one money script being effective in your life, showing up at the same time?
Absolutely. CBT, and when we talk about CBT and we talk about beliefs, we know that we can often have beliefs that are honestly self-contradictory, right? Some
Sure.
days you think you're Superwoman, some days you think you can't do anything, right? So we definitely want to start understanding the underlying beliefs we may have, and when these money scripts may be coming into play.
Wow. So, building on that conversation and dealing with the emotional triggers and biases in the realm of financial management, and considering some of the emotional complexities involved with the decision making, what are some approaches or practices that you recommend for an individual to have greater self awareness when it comes to managing their finances, especially having all of these different money scripts that you just described?
Yeah, I think that simply realizing that there's more beneath the surface is really the first step. A lot of us look at financial issues like they're simply math problems. And by the way, if you happen to hate math, that may make it all the more discouraging, right?
Right.
I would advise each person to think about the money scripts that I just shared and think about which of these they feel most applies to them. If you start to notice the patterns in your thinking about money, you can start to sort of keep an eye out for it, right? It's like putting out an APB for let's keep watching when this kind of comes up. Again, this is basic CBT. Our beliefs drive our day to day thinking, and our thoughts drive our actions. If you can become more familiar with these underlying narratives or beliefs, you can start to notice when they are driving things in the wrong direction for you.
Wow. So, okay, so now we've delved into self-awareness and the emotional regulation and managing our finances. Let's shift focus a little bit to a more interpersonal aspect of financial well-being. From your perspective, how does empathy even come into playing a role with our financial behaviors, or
Yeah,
even our financial relationships, I should say?
Mhm. Yeah, the role of empathy is essentially the other half of emotional intelligence, as I mentioned earlier. So far we've really focused a great deal on our own self-awareness and how that can help you to better understand what underlies your own decision making. What we have referenced so far is how it's often more complicated than may seem on the surface. Empathy's role in financial relationships is to recognize that there may be more going on, more tied into your partner's decision making than you or they may initially realize, right? It's a bit like how partners can have different love languages, right? Money may not mean the same thing to you as it does to the other person. So the role of empathy here is to not immediately jump to conclusions about what may be driving their decision making. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're dating someone for whom money is largely about freedom and power. And maybe for you, money is about security or a means of showing what you value. Though you both may love each other dearly, when it comes to making the decision of whether or not to pool your finances, it can suddenly lead to a lot of conflict. They may be perfectly happy to spend their money on you and very well might do so on a regular basis. But asking that they share a bank account may feel like a direct attack on their freedom and independence, right? And for you, on the other hand, it may feel like that hesitation on their part can feel like a lack of commitment or that they aren't valuing you. The role of empathy here is to try and take the time to understand that what your partner's money script may be, basically understanding that your partner's money script may be, and playing into things and not seeing it solely through the lens of your own narrative and what your money scripts are.
Mhm. I think it's important, just to piggyback on that, to have empathetic communication, like what you were saying, because I think that helps to foster trust. And
Mhm.
also, it ushers into the ability to have those positive discussions when it comes to money matters. Because I mean, chances are none of us are alike, right? So there is a bigger chance that you're going to be with someone, whether it's a business partner or a romantic relationship, where there's going to be different views and ways that they handle money. So I think that that's important to keep in mind. Um, so I just want to, now that we've gone into the empathetic side of things, I just want to talk about, how does one consider if they need the support of financial therapy or some sort of mental support, from some professional mental support, because I'm not a professional mental support person, but somebody, if they needed somebody like you, what are some clear signs to let them know that they actually should seek some professional help?
Yeah. I always say that this is not the definition of insanity, right? But a common saying is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, right? A good sign that it might be time to start financial therapy is when you feel like you've been trying and trying and trying the same thing over and over, but not making a whole lot of headway, right? This reminds me a bit about trying to lose weight, right? You go to a doctor's office and they say increase your exercise, decrease your caloric intake, and then they wish you luck, right? Well, let's be honest. The issue isn't a lack of knowledge of the brass tacks of weight loss. We all know that more calories out than calories in, will lead to weight loss. But the issues often kind of go much deeper than that. It has to do with lifestyle, work-life balance, metabolism, dietary habits inherited from your family of origin, negative beliefs about weight and dieting, right? And so on and so on. I think for many people, that's the same experience that they have when it comes to visiting a financial planner, right? The planner may want to give you a playbook on how to prioritize paying off your debts or in what order to pursue investments or savings and that sort of thing. But in truth, most of that information you could technically probably get from looking it up on and doing some of your own research. But why doesn't it work, right? Why aren't people seeing real and immediate change? In the cases that it doesn't work, right? The reason is because none of these data points or advice are addressing the root issues, right? Let me share another example. I once had a patient who was on the verge of filing for bankruptcy. In talking through her finances, I believe any financial advisor would have been able to advise her to cut back on her expenses.
Mhm.
And in her case, one of the most prominent of these was her Mercedes. As we went through our evaluation, we discovered that between the car note, the cost of insurance, the cost of parking tickets, her monthly cost of her parking space, gas, and other incidentals, she was spending upwards of $1,500 a month on her car alone. That meant
Mhm.
she could have been saving anywhere around 18K per year in post-tax dollars just by getting rid of this vehicle. I
Mhm.
knew this, she knew this, and any other person evaluating the situation would have known this, right? So why was she still holding on to it? In truth, to her, the Mercedes represented her success. It represented all that she had spent years working for, and letting go of that car, even more so than filing for bankruptcy, to her would have symbolized failure. In working together, we were able to kind of help her see how this was a limiting belief tied into her money script around the importance of status, right? We were able to help her untangle her self worth from the car she drove, and we were able to help her identify broader financial and personal goals and the steps that could help her to kind of find greater fulfillment. This same client now owns her own home and is regularly placing her excess income into financial investments. She feels that her finances are more under control and are helping her to live a life more in line with what she's been working for all these years. But it was only by identifying and addressing the limiting beliefs that she was having that we were able to make that breakthrough.
Wow. And so now she's able to identify her money script that was actually holding her bound. Wow, that's powerful. I could talk to you for hours. This has definitely been a great conversation, very educational and insightful. But before we wrap up today's conversation, I just want to share with you guys some reliable or valuable resources that, a lot of times when we're looking for therapists, we don't know what to ask, what to look for. And Dr. Dokun has provided us with a checklist with the 5 essential questions that you should ask when you're searching for a therapist. Do you want to talk a little bit about your checklist?
Sure. The freebie we have today is a tool that you can use when seeking a therapist, whether that be at our practice or elsewhere. These are some questions that can help you frame your initial consultation with a prospective provider. At our practice, these are the typical goals of an initial consultation with our care coordinator. In that initial conversation, you'll want to be sure that your goals for therapy are clear. You should establish what kind of treatment you'll be doing with your provider, and logistics like scheduling and costs should also be clear. So go ahead and grab that freebie and fill it out before your next consultation.
So, guys, download this checklist and arm yourself with the questions you need so that you can get the right support that you need to support you in your journey. And be sure to mark your calendars for Friday because we'll be back with another engaging conversation at 1 o'clock where we're going to really help you shape your financial knowledge. Thank you again, Dr. Dokun, for sharing your expertise and your insight with us tonight. It's been invaluable. Truly, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Renarda. It's been a pleasure to be here.
So be sure to like, share, and subscribe.